It is my very great pleasure to welcome our special guest to Writers' Week, Jasper Fforde.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Jasper, let's start at the very beginning. 1961, born in a particularly good year, I must say. You went to school, but you didn't go to university, and you found work in the film industry as a focus puller.
Yeah, focus puller. All these sort of funny names that you have in the movie industry, like sort of best boy and clapper loader, you know. I think it's jargon, so I'll give you something to read, you know, whilst you're watching the credits. No, I was never academic. Probably, sadly, I don't know, I'm not sure, you know, the jury's still out. But when I left school at 18 with my grade D in art, you can see I was not, you know, desperately trying hard, even in the creative part of school. Mind you, in the UK, it'd probably be a C now, you know. Ho.
Anything's a C.
Topical joke, yeah. In 10 years, it'll be a B.
Yeah.
So I headed towards the thing that attracted me most, which was story. And I always write story in big capital letters because I think it's so of vital importance to humans. You know, there's no part of human endeavour which is not somehow attached by story, where we learn by it, we communicate by it, we entertain by it. And I think the reason I went towards this notion of story, the idea of that you can create a reality out of nothing, was not actually in my head at the time. I think it was sort of there subconsciously, that this is what most attracted me about the film industry. And it wasn't until much later, when I started off in the industry at about age 19. It wasn't until much later, at the age of 27, that I actually started writing. I never even thought I could write.
That's interesting, because in a way, as a musician, as I was trained, I had a similar upbringing. But at the time, did you consider yourself a storyteller when you were, you know, adjusting the focus and you didn't think that you were telling stories as part of a big group?
No, not at all. I mean, I was telling stories as much as the people who manufacture pencils were telling stories, or people who make typewriters. I was a very small cog in a very big machine. I was helping someone else tell their stories. And even from a narrative point of view, whenever you make movies, of course, you don't make them in the right order.
So you don't know exactly you know where they are, but you're not.
So you have this very bizarre way of looking at a story, and to write a book the same way that you make a film, you'd have to be sort of jumping all around all over the place, you know. So I never considered that I was part of, you know, telling stories in a big way.
Because I found as a TV writer, the crew's incredibly smart, and often a writer or a director would say to me, "Good sketch, Dave, the crew liked it."
Yeah.
Were you sitting there going, "I could do better than this"?
Yeah, I mean, and this is what happens, is that when you're in the film industry, of course, you want to be a film director. You know, everyone does, really.
Everyone's a director, everyone's a writer.
Everyone's a producer, everyone's a writer. So when I got there, I was kind of thinking, right, this is great fun. I want to learn my trade, but I also want to make movies as well, because it's tremendous fun. Making movies is great fun. Hugely enjoyable, very exciting, you know, red light and bell, everyone concentrates, and for that, you know, 27-second scene that you're doing, you've got all these people concentrating on it, and it's great fun, very, very exciting. So I thought, well, I want to tell my own stories, and I want to make my own movies, and in those days, of course, it was very hard. You actually had to buy film and have it processed, and then cut it together, you know, using scissors and stuff like that. So it was very expensive. And I thought, well, if I'll make a short movie first on 16mm, black and white, won't be too expensive, get your mates in, all that kind of stuff. So I started writing a script, right? Because somebody had said, I think it was Bob Zemeckis, actually, because he said you can always sort of write your way into movies. So if the screenplay is good, then all the rest follows in afterwards. And this is still absolutely true. You only have to go to the movies nowadays, and you know that, you know, there are very few really good scripts around. So I thought, right, I'm going to make a zinger of a script. And it's going to be so brilliant.
I just have to make it.
It's going to be made, and it's going to be 5 minutes of pure cinematic joy. And there is no one who isn't going to see it, who isn't going to give me millions of pounds to make a massive hit.
Because that's what happens to everyone.
Because that's what happens when you're in your early 20s. Yeah. You have this,
and you know so much.
You do, and you have this wonderful sort of optimism about the world and how it's going to be dropping in your lap, you know, in that wonderful sort of way that teens think. Anyway, so I started writing these scripts, and it was then I realised, then it was frustrating because they were terrible. Looking back on it now, it's actually, I think, one of the strengths that you have to have as an author or playwright or anything, to know when something's rubbish. You know, that's really important, because if you think it's good, right, you don't, you stop trying.
Gets no better, yeah.
Yeah, but if you have a sort of sense of, useful self-loathing, as I clearly did, then the work can get better. So I was doing these scripts, and sorry, I'm just fiddling with my little microphone here. It's all right. I've got the wrong size ears. There you go. If my ear turns black, will you tell me? Yeah. So these scripts were terrible. I mean, they were just awful. And I thought, this isn't working. How can I write a better script? And then I heard that Graham Greene, who wrote, The Third Man, as a lot of other ones as well, but he wrote the script for The Third Man, which I think is like the best movie ever, right? Harvey's good too, but Third Man is brilliant. Anyway, so what he said was that he used to write a treatment, like a novella, and then write the screenplay from the novella, in the basis that you would understand the characters, the theme, very important. A lot of screenwriters forget a theme, very strong theme running through it, the atmosphere, the pace, all these wonderful things that you need. You can put in a novella, and then you make it into a film script, and all is joyful in the world, and money comes pouring in. So I started writing a short story of my next amazing script. And at age 27, this was the first time that I actually really sat down and done some proper creative writing since the age of 13 or 14. And I loved it. There's a sense of purity about the written word, 26 letters and about 9 different punctuation marks. You can do an awful lot with that.
And so that was, did that make its way to a novel, or was this still pre-novel writing?
Yeah, no.
It was novel style. It was a novella, but it wasn't actually a novel.
It was a short story.
A short story.
It was a one-trick pony.
Yeah, but it wasn't a screenplay.
No, it wasn't a screenplay.
Okay.
No, I actually never wrote any screenplays after that.
Okay.
I sort of fell in love with writing.
So you were hooked on fiction.
Yeah.
So I'll throw a quote from something rotten. If the real world were a book, it would never find a publisher. Overlong, detailed to the point of distraction, and ultimately without a major resolution, which I love that quote. Speaking of never finding a publisher, you were tenacious, if nothing else, because you started writing books.
Yeah. I don't know whether tenacious is the right word. I think probably stubborn.
Yeah, or stupid.
Probably
stupid.
People,
loved ones probably thought that at the time.
I don't know. I think it's because I liked it. But once you start... I wrote about 25 short stories, never tried to get them published.
Right.
And then I did, I think, 6.5 novels. And they, over the space of, we're talking about 12 years now. I started age 27, published at 39. And constant rejection, again and again and again. But not rejection as in, that's very interesting, Jasper, we're not sure that the character on page 28 is, really going to work out and blah, blah. None of that, that's kind of helpful. No, it was just like, no. No.
Dear Jasper, on a slightly indented line.
Dear Jasper Fforde, go away. Yours, a publisher.
Ford with one F.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And what you did in those days is you kind of sent in a précis and a chapter, and then hope, and they'd ask to see the rest of it. They never did. Never. Not one single person.
And I heard 76 rejection letters.
But I clearly wasn't working. I mean, 76 rejections over 10 years is only like 7.5 a year.
Yeah.
Which is, if you work it out, one every 7 weeks, which isn't actually tenacious, really.
No, that's right.
I used to write a novel. The first one I did was the Humpty Dumpty one, the police procedural with Humpty Dumpty.
So that came before the air affair.
Oh, yeah. First one I wrote. And I'd send it off. Yeah. And then when people went, no, go away, don't like you, leave, I just went, hey-ho, write another book. And that's what I kind of did, really.
So, but you enjoyed it?
I did.
Because when I talk to writers, I often say to them, what's the best fun you've ever had? And a friend of mine and I who've co-written, we had the expensive TV series where we got well paid, but we say it was the time in the kitchen when we wrote about the Catholic priests or something, and we laughed and laughed and laughed and didn't get a cent for it, but it was the best time.
Yeah.
Do you have a feeling about that time before you were published? Did you actually have a smile on your face while you were writing?
I do, because sort of looking back on it, because someone once asked me, do you enjoy writing, as a professional writer? And it's kind of, you have to think of it in that kind of slightly Winnie the Pooh sort of way, because he got asked what he likes, and then he thought, well, eating honey, but then he stopped himself and he went, no, that moment just before you eat the honey, is actually slightly better. And in the same way, I think that actually having written is actually more enjoyable than writing itself. But looking back on those early days where I was like, it was basically one huge sandbox, and I was experimenting. I came from no education, right, in writing. I didn't go to any courses, nothing. I was kind of just discovering it on my own in a kind of vaguely sort of inspired ignorance, if you like, and experimentation. And I think for me, that was the most exciting time. I was just discovering all this new stuff and sort of, naming the animals in the Garden of Eden.
But in a sense, educating yourself in very many different ways and reading widely.
Yeah.
I'm sure that went on at the same time and having a great time. Is it still fun, or we'll go on a time warp and jump up and today is it still fun, or
it is still fun, although there is now pressure, because in those days there was no pressure. It was just write a book, didn't sell, doesn't matter, you're not a writer, you're a focus puller, write another, simple.
And the first one failed, so I'll make the second one in the same series.
Exactly. I mean
that is brilliant.
It's a brilliant idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, how good was my strategy?
It's so stupid, but it's worked out brilliantly.
Well, it has. I thought, you see, this is the thing, and to anyone out there who is a writer, never write Me Too books. If someone said the worst piece of advice I was ever given was also the only piece of advice I was ever given, because I got one meeting with an agent before I was published. I'd only ever met one agent. This was it, and she said in her plush offices. I don't know how I got the interview. Don't know what it was. Anyway, she said, well, flicking through my manuscript in that kind of way that people do when they're really not interested, She goes, well, it's comedy, is it? Like this, and I went, well, sort of. It's actually many things, Oh, right, comedy. Well, it really doesn't sell, Jasper. And if you want to be published, I think the best thing to do is to go and look at the bestseller lists and then write something similar. Like this. And I went, well, that's very good advice. Thank you very much. Get me out of this room now. It's the worst advice. You've got to write what you want, what excites you, what amuses you, what you love. Because what you're doing in any creative industry, it's like your worldview. This is exporting your worldview. And if your worldview is slightly off kilter and weird and different, then that's what you've got to go for. Not this sort of Me Too.
So someone's biggest fault is your biggest asset.
Exactly.
In a sense,
you see,
so what you've got going for you is that thing that other people go, oh, that's a bit weird.
Exactly, and that's all these endless rejections is not so generally. Well, it was probably because they weren't very good either. I did have to learn my trade. I think no one is an instant writer. Well, some people are. Some really annoying people, instant writers.
Oh, I hate them too. Yeah, I hate you. We'll get them later.
They just write perfect sentences.
Yeah.
Well, how can you do that? So yeah. I mean, the weakness of writing books that no publisher wants to have a look at. Then becomes a strength, because you're writing stuff that no publisher ever wanted to have a look at because it was kind of too weird and off kilter.
So the moment that someone said yes, how did that come about?
It came about because my agent at the time was starting up an agency. Luck is a wonderful thing, and it's one of those sort of commodities that we should really hope for or try and generate, if you like, for yourself. And you do generate it for yourself. And I just had this fantastically lucky break where my agent, Tiff, at the time, was just starting an agency in the UK. It was a satellite branch of a very, very big agency in New York, of which, of course, I knew nothing. And she said, I rang her up, just out of chance. Someone gave me a Post-it note with a number on it. Look, try Tiff. Here's the number on the Post-it. I still have that Post-it. It is framed. It is on my wall. Right. And she said, she was like, almost pretending to be her own secretary because she didn't have a budget. Hello, can I help you? One of those. I'm just putting you through. Hello, yes. One of those. And she had no furniture in the office, and all her receipts were in a shoebox. She had no clients. You know, if you ever want to get an agent, people say to me, what sort of agent do I want? One with no clients is the one you want. Someone who's just starting. So
she had you on the books with nothing published, but lots of different things written, and that was the agency.
There was nothing. She had no clients. You know, and she'd been told by this big agency, look, you've got a budget of whatever it was, 20 grand a year, and if you don't have any clients by the end of the year, that's it. You're finished. And she was reading everything. Right, this is the big thing. She was reading everything.
Because a lot don't read, really, do they?
Well, and sometimes there's a reason for that. We can get onto that.
Okay.
But anyway, she was reading everything, and she said, "Okay, tell me about your book." And I told it to her, and it's difficult to explain. The air affair, hard one to explain, and she went, in that way that people sort of say when you try and explain what the air affair is about. And she said, "Well, send it over," and I did. And she read the whole thing, and then she rang me up and said, okay, this could work. I like this. It's totally bizarre.
Yeah.
It's not what we've been used to publishing, because this is, don't forget, 2000, and it's been the decade of chicklit and ladlit, dominating the bookshops.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, something comes up, which is a kind of literary-based crime thriller with sort of Jane Eyre and werewolves and time travel and alternative history all sort of squunged together. And kind of no one's really done that before. Maybe a little bit in, I suppose, Wicked would probably be the closest thing. And she said, no, well, I think we can sell this. And she said, can I have it and try and sell? And I said, look, have it for the next 10 years. No one's shown any interest at all.
Have them all.
Have them all. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
For free. And she managed to get me placed in 2 weeks.
Yeah. So not a wunderkind with a prize at 21 and the world looking. You had that time in a way, like you say, to practice your craft.
It was not me. And people say, oh, how'd you keep going with that sort of rejection? I go, well, it kind of wasn't. I think I kind of knew, going back to that sense of, self-loathing, is I kind of knew it wasn't good yet, but the ideas were sound. I felt the ideas were sound. They just needed polishing up. They needed buffing up to a
So you weren't
higher
kicking
sheen.
the table and...
No, not at all. And I had a great job,
right,
focus pulling.
No, absolutely. And well paid, film industry.
Yeah, it was
great.
brilliant.
And good big movies,
Big movies. And the great thing, the other, again, luck, this comes into it again. If I'd had a job that was like a 50-hour-a-week job, I would never have been able to write. But because I had a job that I could really write 2.5 days a week on average, I think, with a movie and then time off and everything, all of a sudden I had time available, and the most expensive thing in writing is time.
So in the books, it's called, some people call the whole category the what if category, or I think you call it the narrative dare, which I love as it'll probably they'll start teaching it in school or something, and you'll die a little death inside.
No, I'll swell.
Oh, you'll swell.
Right,
okay. Yeah. And people will copy you, and
as long as my name's attached to it, I think something like that.
But is that how they start? Is they all start with that question? What if something happened?
Yeah,
what if Humpty Dumpty died? What if?
Yeah, always.
So that's, if you like, the inciting incident or the inciting question that starts it.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't something that I knew until the thing about writing first and then being published. And then I turn up at talks like this, and people ask me, questions like, where do you get your ideas? And I have to think of something. Is that I learned to write first and then figured out how I wrote afterwards.
Yeah.
Which seems sort of kind of... Sorry, I'm having my trouble with this again. I'll just give my ear a squeeze. There we go. So it's a topsy-turvy way of learning to write. So I learned to write first and then figured out how I wrote. And then with that sort of self-reflection, it was really quite interesting. And I went back, in a sort of forensic way, looking at how I wrote, and I came across this notion of the narrative dare. And all my books have this central narrative dare that I never let myself off the hook, and then I have to explain it.
And okay. Why or what if?
Why? Humpty Dumpty is a murder mystery. He's been murdered. Explain. Right.
Yeah.
In The Fourth Bear, why was the porridge at different temperatures when it was poured at the same time?
Right.
And add that to that. Why were Mummy Bear and Daddy Bear sleeping in separate beds? All narrative dares. If Jane Eyre was kidnapped out of Jane Eyre, who would get her back and why? Why is she being kidnapped? And all these books have some sort of narrative dare.
Have you ever
to make them work?
Gone back on a narrative dare and had it and then gone not worth it?
No.
Okay.
No. And I
So you've
think,
seen it through.
yeah, and that's vital importance.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I was writing short stories, which was really my training ground, what I did is I gave myself more and more bizarre narrative dares.
Yep,
On the
yeah.
basis, this is a theory, is there is no idea too stupid that you can't write it and write it well. No idea that's not too stupid. Silly is good, sort of stupid bad, and I kind of teeter on the knife edge sometime. But I did a story once about a man who turns into a banana. Right. Okay, that was the narrative dare. Now that is stupid. Okay, that can't work, or can it? And the thing about not letting yourself off the hook with a narrative dare is you start rummaging deeper in the toolbox. The authorial toolbox, if you like, and you can pick out all kinds of interesting things, like the reader's expectation and sort of smoke and mirrors and all those sort of wonderful ideas. That
So you don't spend a lot of time going, nah, it probably wouldn't work.
No, I generally say, no, this can work. Okay, let's create a sort of a world order based on visual colour. Okay, how's that going to work? Well, I don't know. I just started on it, and then all of a sudden, 2.5 years later, this book,
A caste system, a hierarchy.
yeah, and all of a sudden it sort of started working, and it's quite difficult. But and then I thought, right, okay, I'm going to have a lead male, a beta male. I like right, my male leads are generally beta males. I think they're kind of interesting. And I've got to have it's a first-person narrative in a very strange world that he is uninterested about. And this is kind of a challenge. But when you have challenges, then you can pull the rabbit out of the hat more because you're trying harder to make it work.
Yeah.
So giving up on a narrative dare actually is counterproductive.
Right.
Because what you're essentially saying is you're letting yourself off the hook and do something much easier.
Yeah.
And then
doing the same old thing rather than pushing yourself.
Absolutely. And then you're going down the Me Too route.
Yeah. So keeping it original. It's interesting. In terms of reading you and reading about you, on one hand you're writing in a genre, well, you're writing in a whole lot of genres. It's funny, it's crime fiction, it's fantasy, but you're not a pretentious literary type, either in person or in your writing. Yeah. Yet at the same time, you're quite an erudite bugger. You're doing it was a lovely mix of absolute, sort of dumb puns at times and fun, but also, boy, you've read your stuff and you know about that. How conscious is that, or is that just you and that's what you write about?
It's certainly something that I find amusing. I mean, if there's a sort of jumping off point for the Thursday Next series, it was a Monty Python sketch, where they do Wuthering Heights by Semaphore Flag. And then Heathcliff and all that stuff. Yeah. And then they did Julius Caesar with the Aldous lamp. Click, 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 click. Two Brutus. And for me, that was a wonderful idea, a beautiful, beautiful, fantastic idea, because it mixed the very highbrow with really quite with low comedy as well. And for me, that was perfect because it was not only it was not sort of I don't know, sort of shaking at these sort of these calves and making things fall off their pedestal, but it was kind of trying to regain the classics, if you like, away from being study texts. Yep. And there's a kind of sniggering at the back of English class that I really enjoyed about it. Making up jokes about Hamlet, who sort of escapes out of Hamlet, comes into the real world, and it goes into Starbucks, and then he's offered a choice, and he sort of spontaneously soliloquies, to mocha or to latte. That is the question, because that's what Hamlet does if you give him a choice, because he can't make up his mind.
So you actually visit schools and stuff. I mean, what a great way to teach. Not just a neat book, but Jane Eyre, for example. Have you interacted with students about those sort of topics when you
about classics? Maybe not so much with classics, certainly with nursery rhymes.
Right.
And that's a great thing you can do with kids. Is to just look at those very familiar stories from another viewpoint. From the bear's viewpoint. Who basically got their house trashed.
That's right.
So there's always different ways of coming at things.
So we have a literary establishment, well reviewed in the London Review of Books, and you're not. Do you feel what I'm trying to get at is, if we're working in humour, if we're working in fantasy, are we sort of regarded by some as slightly second-class citizens, as if it's quite easy to do that, whereas it's so hard?
Yeah, I mean, the literary establishment only likes literary books, it seems to me.
Right.
Yeah, but I kind of never thought I worked in literary stuff. I think I'm entertainment.
Right.
You know,
even though you're drawing on really classics of English literature.
Yeah, but we're kind of having we're being sort of reverently irreverent, if you like.
Yeah.
It's, yes, I'm having fun with the classics, but it's not like I'm sort of maligning them in any big way.
We don't have to shut up and behave ourselves as you would do with them.
I think I'm fairly true to the spirit.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
And I think that's really, important, because all of this stuff are actually really good books. Apart from Wuthering Heights and Pamela, of course.
Right. So, what is the most boring book in English literature?
I think it might be.
What does Jasper?
I
Jasper
think
Fforde
Pamela is pretty boring.
Right.
I have to say. There's quite a few dire books. But to be fair, the 3-volume series was the sort of de rigueur, novel, and people were being paid by the word. So,
Given that you talked about Monty Python before, and being the same age, I remember that no video, you just watched Monty Python and memorised it. Were you one of those? Kids.
Absolutely.
But were the other influences with your humour? Were they TV influences? Were they writers? Where can you remember sort of thinking, wow?
I think they came from everywhere.
Right.
I mean, I like to think that it's a question that comes around a lot, and it's usually framed in which writers inspired you to be a writer. And I always think, well, if you just choose writers, you're selling yourself so short, because there is such wonders out there in TV writing, and in my decade is the 70s, and the British sitcoms of the 70s were just fantastic. I mean, they were just beautiful and wonderful. And then there's theatre, and there's radio comedy, which is a very precise, funny sort of comedy, and all these things can inform and delight and inspire. So I draw from everywhere.
New Zealand, of course, is interesting because we had all that same influence, but probably more English. But now, of course, it's far more American. And so I find writing students, they'll write a TV series set in America. And I'll go, what about New Zealand? They go, what do you mean? And have you heard of these iconic Fawlty Towers, the Carry On movie, all the things from the 60s, 70s, 80s, the young ones, and it will just be a blank. What about in where you live, in England and Wales? Is that pervasive, if you like, American influence there, or is there still a lot of English stuff?
There is, and I think the big difference I find between them is that the American comedy is going for a lot of good laughs. And you get a lot of strong, frequent laughs. But I always felt that the British comedy, the sitcom comedy, was a slow burn. Jokes you would remember forever. Fawlty Towers. The episodes you just remember, and they have a sort of slow burn effect, and they stay with you. But I think a lot of US comedy, not all of it, is playing there just for the instant laugh. And I think that's the difference between jokes that you get from stand-up comedians, where you can remember laughing constantly for an hour, but can you remember a single joke? No, usually. And a really good funny movie, or a very funny book, where you have these slow build-ups and then a fantastic payoff that stays with you forever. I'd go for the latter always.
And of course, American TV has got so much better in their drama of late.
Oh my God,
we watch
fantastic.
HBO and stuff.
There's such writing talent over there.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because not a lot of writers say look outside literature, whereas a lot of directors, and maybe it's because you're from the film industry originally, a lot of directors say to film people, don't just watch movies, read books. But you're sort of saying that
absolutely go everywhere. Really, there is treasure everywhere. Even listening to conversations, on the bus or anything, you just sort of tune in, or people chattering away in the lobby of a hotel. I remember listening. I was in I think it was Edinburgh, of a big hotel at the end of Princes Street, and there were these two women, well-to-do women, and they were sort of passing one another in the lobby. And one of them said, "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Brown?" And the other one goes, "No, quite the reverse." And and that kind of stuck with me.
Shades of grey.
Yeah, and I think, well,
The
I
reverse
think I put it into one of my books somewhere.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it seems so, but it's wonderfully random. And when you're trying, it's so hard to write random. And because there's so much randomness in the real world, I think it's a lot of the time that's why books, a book that is really, really true to life has certain sort of aspects of randomness in it, which is almost impossible to write. So you have to draw on these things that you hear people say.
But, I know New Zealand writer Janet Frame used to say she always got a bus somewhere. She didn't drive, but she did. She could afford taxis as she got older, but the bus, I hear the most amazing things.
Oh, God, absolutely.
On the bus, and I put them in the play, and people say, "What a brilliant line!" No, it's not. It was on the bus.
Absolutely. This is. You've probably seen the Shakespeare in Love, and this wonderful scene where he's wandering around, old London, listening to what people are saying, and they're lines that you recognise from his plays, and you go, yes, this is exactly what it is. I was on a train once going up from Newport in Wales up to my stop near Hereford, and it was one of those 2-carriage, very small trains, and this very, very Welsh girl was having a long and very loud conversation on a mobile phone. You could have heard a pin drop in that carriage. We were all tuned in to this conversation about her friends and her boyfriend and all the things that were going on. And
you hope it'll finish before you get off.
Absolutely.
And maybe we'll go further on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would, miss it by 2 stops, just to listen to the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
But everyone was tuned in.
Write notes on the way back to where you live.
Writing it all down. It's brilliant.
Absolutely. Like you, though I went to university, I didn't study writing. I studied music and did other things, played in bands and stuff. And I was fascinated to meet a writer that came from it, if you like, a craft, and you did it on your own, basically. Today, and it's not anyone's fault, but today people they finish, and I'm sure it's the same in England and Wales as here. We go to university. Young people who want to be writers do a degree. They might do a master's in creative writing, and then they might become a successful writer, or they might become a teacher of creative writing. And have we lost a little with that? Do you, as in a way, a craftsperson, do you go, I don't know if we're going to get that imagination. I don't know if we're going to get.
I don't know, because there are actually lots of very good authors who've come out of this system. Yeah, but.
I mean, I teach in it, so I'm not dissing it. I'm just interested in the people who aren't in it, like me and you.
But I think maybe the people who come out of university as good writers, they might be good writers anyway.
Yeah.
And whether they needed the university, I'm not sure. Yeah. In the UK now, we have this notion. I mean, Tony Blair said about 15 years ago that he wants to see half of everyone going into, well, not half of everyone. He wants half.
There's a narrative there.
Half of all people to go into university, and that actually happened about 4 months ago. And now what we have is this situation where we have really, really qualified people making coffee for us. And industry and everything else has not kept pace with the amount of graduates. And my son's girlfriend wants to be a marine biologist. She will not get a job in marine biology unless she has a doctorate. She's doing a BA at the moment. She'll have to do, no, hang on, it was Bachelor of Science, thank you. And then she has to go on to do the Masters, and she'll have to eventually go on to do a PhD. So she's looking at 7 years before she can consider. And I think, it works for universities, of course, because they get $9,000 a year. But whether it works for everybody, I'm not sure. Whether we've been sort of somehow sold a bit of a sort of scam.
So maybe the baby with the bath. I mean, we used to have such an anti-intellectual tradition in New Zealand, but in 60s and 70s, people, just before I did it, you would just get a job. It might be freezing works or rural work, and you met people and characters like the lady on the bus. Yeah, and you could write about it.
Yeah, absolutely,
and
absolutely.
They don't run training courses for meeting strange people.
No, sadly. And also, I mean, the other thing, of course, I mean, I don't know what it's like here, but in the UK, you can come out with £35,000 worth of debt as well before you even got a job. So I think it's slightly worrying, but it's difficult to say. But when I give talks to people who are just starting out and want to be writers, I say go and work at McDonald's for 2 months. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I mean but people do have to work at McDonald's. Yeah. But if you want to meet bizarre people, that are going to be, and I don't mean that unpleasantly, but places like that, you meet some very, very interesting characters.
Customer of the month, yes.
Yeah, and the conversations that you'll have as you're changing for your shift will be fascinating, and the people you meet are very, very interesting. And it's important, I think.
Absolutely, and it's the real world, and it's what's going on. And I'm interested in, to move on to the people who love your work, your fans. Is there a typical Jasper Fforde fan?
No. That's what's so brilliant.
Fantastic.
Oh, no, it's great. It really is great.
My sort of vision of the 22-year-old with a beard that works in IT with an anorak is wrong.
No, not at all.
Okay.
No.
Or the woman that went to Shakespeare but now works in marketing but did a degree in Shakespeare and loves it. They're all sorts.
No, that's what's so wonderful about it, and this is kind of totally unexpected to me, is that the demographic seems to be really very broad.
Wow,
I
fantastic.
get sort of switched on 13-year-olds who think it's great because they get so much of it and they love that. It's like finding Easter eggs, 3 on every page, because they get it, and that's fun and it's exciting because when you're a kid and you understand illusion, I think it's hugely exciting. I remember, suddenly understanding what my parents were talking about, when I was a kid, and it was, oh, I get it. There's a whole different sort of language out there, this sort of meta language that you can suddenly key into. It's very exciting. So I love that baby. Brilliant. Thank you. But then also there are people who've loved literature all their lives, and then they discover my books, in perhaps their 80th or 90th year, 8th or 9th decade, and are going, yes, this is absolutely, because this is a love of literature that clearly we share. So it's.
Do you have any we're in the Embassy Theatre, the home of the world premiere of both the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Do you have any weird fans, freaky fans?
No. I mean,
really?
No. Well, okay. Weird and how do you define weird and freaky? It's
Well, someone turned up at my house with hand cream once.
Did they?
She was in her 70s, I think, but it was rather weird. She'd made it herself. So
absolutely.
Okay. It might just be me. I thought.
No, I get marmalade made for me.
Oh, great.
Yeah. I was given marmalade, and I like marmalade. I couldn't bring it here, obviously.
Yeah.
I had to give it away.
Yeah.
People appear with dodos, right? And I've signed about 20 dodos' feet in my life. But I don't think that's weird or unusual.
Okay.
To me, that seems fairly normal, really. But what it is, it's kind of an enthusiastic.
It's fantastic.
It is. It's an enthusiasm for ideas, for shared ideas. And I'm going, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could re-engineer dodos from extinction? And lots of other people are going, oh, I love that idea.
Here you go.
I'm going to go and make one right now.
Right.
And I'm going, I really like that.
And I agree with it. And probably snobs like me go, oh, that's a bit weird. But no, you're right. Because that passion and enthusiasm. Yeah. And again, I sometimes think you'd really love it if, the John Donne Society were throwing grenades at the people that like Christopher Marlowe.
Yeah.
Have we lost our love of literature? Is literature actually not really important anymore?
No, it is. And it is important because it's, as I was saying, it's kind of like a bedrock. It's like if you were to stop, if you were to spend an entire day just talking normally, and then you would then analyse what you've said, and then found how many sort of Shakespearean idioms had dropped into your conversation, you'd be surprised by how much they are. So it's kind of all with us, all the time. It's part of it. It's part of the sort of DNA, that big story in capital letters I was talking about. It's there in all of us. And every now and again, it sort of just bubbles to the surface, even if it's like Pride and Prejudice and zombies, which I haven't seen. I don't know anything about it at all. And I did have a couple of people saying, I don't think this is a good idea. And I'm going, no, it's a fantastic idea, because Pride and Prejudice is back on the radar. They make a film of Jane Eyre every 3 years. Really, pretty much. And some are good, some are bad, some are indifferent. But it's back on the radar. Alice in Wonderland, there was a very strange one done by Tim Burton a few years back. doesn't matter if you liked it or you didn't like it. It's back on the radar. So I think that these stories are there because they're good. You know, it's not because, we have to study them.
But we're
it's
not
there because they're good.
I totally agree, but we're not, as in your books, fighting over them or coming to blows about who we think is better.
Yeah.
Are you actually mourning that? Are you a guy that would actually quite like to be part of a group that went around attacking?
I would. Yeah, I think I would. I don't know. I could say sort of in a very highfalutin way. You know, well, we as novelists, you know, we're trying to improve an imperfect world.
Yeah.
You know, and in my perfect world, it's like Thursday's world. Where everyone loves literature but is no less violent, you know, because that's like humans, you know, we're just kind of like that. But, you know, I mean, I never wanted to go to a football match ever. You know, I don't like soccer. I don't like any sport, you know, I think it's a bit boring, really. But I would certainly go to, you know, some huge, you know, 40,000 person arena to watch some fantastically good Hamlet. You know, because imagine watching Hamlet with 40,000 people.
Hamlet hooligans.
Yeah, and then you start sort of having a bit of a punch up. You know, don't push me. You know, well, you know, or maybe one where there's some sort of division. You know, like Romeo and Juliet. You know, and you can have Montague's one side, you know, Capulet's the other, and there's a little bit of sort of, you know, that, you know, you're biting your thumb, you know, all that kind of stuff, and you know, sort of, you know, fights and everything like that. And I don't know, I just like that idea.
That's a fantastic idea.
Yeah,
no,
I
love it. So perhaps you could organise it for the next Ford Fiesta. Tell me.
Yeah,
I was
Ford
just
Fiesta.
so fascinated that a whole festival, not started by you, but by your fans.
No,
in
great?
Swindon.
In Swindon.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, it's interesting. People burst out laughing at the name Swindon. In New Zealand, they used to burst out laughing if you mentioned Tai Happy in a play or something.
Oh, really?
A small town, you know.
Right.
But I was really interested in the festival. So tell me about that. And we'll talk about Swindon in a minute.
Yeah. Well, the Ford Fiesta, a double F in Fiesta, obviously. Fiesta being a Ford motor car as well. You've probably had Fiestas here, yeah. So it's like a triple pun. It's wonderful. It's beautiful.
It's great.
I do like that.
You didn't come up with it?
What?
Did you come up with
the
Ford?
Did.
You did?
I did.
Fantastic.
Well, originally it was the Ford gathering or something. And clearly we had been missing dropped the ball badly. And then I suddenly went, Ford Fiesta, and they went, yes.
Oh, that's it. And it doesn't have the word literature in it. Fantastic.
It's just slotted into place. This was begun just by a group of enthusiastic readers who just love the ideas. And I think there's so many ideas in my books that there's something kind of for everyone, and there's a sort of bigger dialogue. I mean, I think we've had 5 people married now who've either met in a signing queue or on the forum. But I really like that idea that if you're in a Jasper Fforde signing queue, you must be able to talk to the person behind you about tons of stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think you're interested in stuff, in the way that stuff is that sort of broad encompassing wonder of, you know, what we get up to as humans. So we have all these people meeting in my queues and getting married and having children and stuff.
Fantastic. And they do events from your book, like Richard III being performed.
Basically they took this further, and they said, well, why don't we do something to do with Jasper's books? Yeah.
Well,
what could we do? Well, what couldn't we do? There's tons. You know, we had Hamlet soliloquy speed reading.
Yeah.
Right. Well, not reading. You have to learn it off by heart. So you'd have to do the to be or not to be speech as fast as you can and still make it intelligible. And sort of losers like Laurence Olivier, you know, it takes him 4.5, 5 minutes. You know, ages. But we can do it in like 35 seconds.
Right.
So.
And people practice and come back and do it.
Yeah. And then we change that, and we have different types of poetry. We have Name That Fruit, which is this terrible. Terrible sort of game show in my books, and all the questions were always fruit related, and because they didn't have much money, and they were making the spin the fruit thing, so there are all these fruit, and you spin it, and then it points to a fruit. You see, that's how it works, and then you go a peach question, and then you do, and it's really silly. Anyway, they didn't have much money to make the spin the thing, so it's not very good, and it always points to pineapple. So every time we spin it, right. And they go, what will it come at? And it's pineapple. And this has gone on for 10 years now. and we will never improve the spinning thingamy.
You need to move the Ford Fiesta to Vegas and make millions.
I think we would. Then we had this thing called avoid the question time, because we have this, I'm sure you do here in politics, all the politicians come along to do question time, and I renamed it avoid the question time and made it into a bit of a sort of game show in one of my books. And we have this now, which is our version of just a minute, in which you can't repeat. There's no repeating. There's no repetition, pausing, or relevance. Right. So what you have to do is you're given a subject to talk about, and you're not allowed to talk about it. So if you say anything that relates to the subject, then that's not allowed, because you're meant to be avoiding the question. Right. It's simple, isn't it? But then the challenges get very, very complex. He mentioned so-and-so, which is, and then my stick insect's first owner's hat maker's best friend, and it becomes very funny. But of course, the last subject that you have to avoid talking about is life, the universe, and everything, which is quite hard to talk about something that isn't about life, universe, and everything. But we have a lot of fun.
Oh, it sounds great. It just sounds fantastic, and
fun.
You must enjoy it.
I do. I love it. And there's a fancy dress gala on Saturday night, and it's like me falling into my own head. So it's very strange. And I come dressed as Jasper Fforde, and I have never won.
Okay.
Which is, and every year I say, look, Jasper Fforde, and they go,
I think there was a story of Graham Greene did the New Statesman thing where you had to write like Graham Greene, and he didn't win. He came third or something.
Yeah, that's right. Charlie Chaplin. Yeah,
someone else did a better.
Yeah, I stole that for Hamlet. Hamlet does a Hamlet lookalike contest, comes third.
Right. Yeah. So what was interesting about there's lots of flippancy fun, but there's also some science and some interesting scientific concepts and ideas. How are you? Do you read science? Are you interested in science? Are you always looking for scientific sort of innovation, technology?
I mean, being someone who didn't go to university or anything like that, it doesn't make me a specialist in anything.
No, but it also doesn't make you go, oh, chemistry lectures, I'm never going to read a book about chemistry again. Or
but I kind of am interested in everything. So
I get that from reading.
Master of all trades, jack of all trades, master of none. Which I think is a good thing to be. And I tend to fill my head up with bizarre, useless, strange, yet interesting facts. And because my mind seems to, is kind of sticky like a drift net, and I get all this stuff in there, that when I'm writing and I go, okay, what are we going to do here? I go, I have this fact that I heard 17 years ago, and I can use it at this precise moment. And I remember it, and it's completely unrelated to that other fact that I remembered 2 years ago. But if I put them together, as if by magic, a new idea pops off. So it's very helpful for me. And because I'm interested in science and everything else, it all sort of comes together.
So, for example, in the Error Fair, there's some carbon paper, I think, that her uncle, that Thursday's uncle, and you write on it, and it translates into 3 or 4 different languages. And I was trying to find the French for something, and Google Translate, and I went, actually, you're onto that a long time ago. Have there been other things in your books that have sort of reappeared, and you've gone, I predicted that, or I knew about that?
Let's think.
Perhaps in a different...
Yeah, there are some things. I mean, I had this weird notion that the war was still on in the Crimea.
But wasn't that true, that it didn't actually get formally... I think I saw a QI or something about it.
That it hasn't actually finished?
That they didn't properly finish it?
Oh, probably not, no. Or even whether properly started it.
I don't know.
Right. All sorts of things, but I mean, I think it's less about me being some soothsayer with magic fingers or anything, and it's because I have a lot in the books.
Right.
So by maths alone,
something just if you throw enough electrons, one will hit the
absolutely.
One will hit the.
But I do like when somebody explains something about because the physics in my book and the maths in my book. Can't work.
No, that's right.
And whenever I sort of mangle some physics or some maths problem, and it could just have a sort of semblance of reality about it, I tend to sort of pull back and make it more impossible.
Right, but do you love reading about and appreciate the beauty of physics and maths and those formulas?
Yeah,
so you're into that, 'cause I get that sense that.
Oh yeah, no, I love all those sort of things.
And with recent discoveries where we actually do look at the time warps and the
Yeah,
black
and gravity
matter
waves.
and anti-gravity.
Yeah, narrative waves rippling through the book world.
But you're interested in those, if you like, real things that are you keep up with what.
Oh, absolutely. And if there's any way that
the
I
Higgs
can,
boson and things like that.
if any way I can actually use them in my books. I mean, there's the Thursday Next series. I think there's 7 books at the moment, and I've been working towards the 8th, which is called Dark Reading Matter.
Right.
Okay.
So
there you go. So I have this idea that the observable book world is only actually maybe 8 or 9% of the stories that are out there. The books, the stories that we can read, and where is this, dark reading matter, as it's known, and what holds it together? And if you could get into it, you'd find all these amazing manuscripts that have been destroyed and no longer exist. So there's something I can use there, I think.